7 dead hostages, 7 hostages who were alive on October 7th, but were murdered in captivity by Hamas terrorists. The IDF announced on Wednesday night that it had retrieved the body of slain hostage Itai Svirski and brought it back to Israel for burial. The army also revealed that 6 hostages who were previously thought to have been killed in an Israeli airstrike were actually murdered by Hamas in the terror tunnels. All the tragic details in the following report. One photo that encapsulates the tragedy. An empty grave with the words "Saved for Itai" in Hebrew. On the right, Orit Svirski. On the left, Rafi Svirski, Itai's parents who were both murdered by Hamas on October 7th. Following a daring operation by Israeli security forces, Itai will finally be reunited with his family.
אני מעדכן הערב כי במבצע משותף של שב"כ וצה"ל ברצועת עזה חולץ השבוע החטוף איתי סבירסקי, זיכרונו לברכה. הוא חולץ משטח הרצועה למדינת ישראל. איתי נחטף מבית הוריו בקיבוץ בארי ב-7 באוקטובר.
Itai was taken hostage on October 7th, but 102 days later, the IDF informed his remaining family that he had been murdered in captivity, along with hostage Yossi Sarabi, and that their bodies were being held in Gaza. A few days earlier, the 2 men appeared in a Hamas psychological terror video alongside Noah Al-Gamani, who was rescued alive by the IDF earlier this year. A statement from the Hostages Families Forum, which represents families of those being held by Hamas, said that returning Itai's body for proper burial in Israel provides crucial closure for his family. And the Svirski family is not the only family to receive closure. A comprehensive probe by the IDF has discovered that 6 hostages who were previously thought to have been killed in an Israeli airstrike were actually murdered by Hamas, their bodies riddled with bullet holes. The 6 hostages were Nadav Popelwell, Yegev Buchstav, Yoram Metzger, Haim Peri, Alexander Danzig, and Avram Mundel, who were killed in February and whose bodies were recovered in August in a tunnel in Khan Yunis. The IDF said on Wednesday that Hamas likely murdered them in response to an Israeli airstrike.
התחקיר בחן את נסיבות מותם של החטופים והעלה מספר אפשרויות. האפשרות אותה אנחנו מעריכים כסבירה ביותר היא כי בעקבות התקיפה המחבלים רצחו את החטופים והמחבלים עצמם נהרגו כתוצאה מתוצר לוואי של התקיפה.
Hamas has instructed its operatives to murder the hostages should Israeli forces close in on their location, hindering Israeli efforts for any rescue attempts. There are now 100 hostages being held in Gaza for 426 days. Among them, 80-year-old Gadi Moses, who was kidnapped from his home in Kibbutz Nir Oz with his partner, Efrat Katz, her daughter, Doron, and her 2 young daughters, all taken hostage. Gadi's ex-wife, Margalit Moses, was also taken hostage. All the women have since been released, but Gadi remains behind. Joining us now is Efrat Machikawa, the niece of Gadi Moses. Efrat, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
So today we opened with the news of another slain hostage being recovered from Gaza. What is your reaction when you hear such news?
You know, Itai's family became very, very close to us, and it's really heartbreaking. It's hard. It's good to know he's back, but I think it takes time to make the closure. It's really very, very hard to deal with it. And tomorrow, we will probably see them. And we are all trying to adjust from day to day. And day 406 has been too long. And we don't know what's going on with Gadi. We don't know what's going on with the rest. There are too many there, and nothing has been done. And although we know there are things going on, we're not sure of what is going on, and we're so tired of hoping. We want actions. But I have to say, we feel tired and we feel disappointed. but it's nothing according to what our beloved ones feel. So we're strong enough to wait for them here and to be ready to hug them, to support them, to have their rehabilitation start.
And you know, your uncle is being held for over a year now. When was the last time that you heard any information on him, received any, proof of life?
That was on December 19th. It was a night I was in Berlin. On the 20th, I had a big speech going on the Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra. And I remember I was awakened around midnight, and I was told there is a video released. And it took me some time to actually have the guts to watch it. And it's very, very difficult. It was a year ago, and he already seemed very weak. But I hope that the people that are holding him do see how special he is, how wonderful he is to the world, and maybe that will hold him strong enough to come back. We miss him daily. It's by seconds. We go to sleep with him, we wake up with him, we advocate all around the world for his release. But we're still failing. We haven't been able to do that. Although I have to share that I do not think it's on our behalf. The responsibility is in the hands of our Prime Minister. He has to do that. And I was very glad to hear President-elect Trump announcing what he announced. And we're grateful for his vision. But truly, it's not enough. It is upon our government to make sure they do the right thing to release them and bring them home. Because hugs and sympathy is not enough. We need them physically with us at home. They are the citizens of these states. They belong here. They deserve to be back.
Absolutely. And you mentioned President-elect Trump's very powerful statement threatening that the hostages must be released by January 20th. And reports indicate that a new deal is now on the table. Are you optimistic that a deal will be reached now in light of these recent events?
Although we had all these disappointments, I have to say, every time I hear of a tiny little bit of a chance, my optimism grows. I am optimistic because I know this is the right thing to do. So I believe at the end of the day, the right thing will be done. They will be back. And I hope that the Egyptians, I hope that the Qataris, I hope the Americans, I do hope other countries like Germany are there to make sure to be the responsible one, to make sure things are happening and they will be back.
And you also
I see my friend Karen. I just saw Karen Wunder in the video you just showed. You know, there are 29 people from Kibbutz Nir Oz, and we know them all and we miss them all. It is an incredible number of people from the community. And yeah, it's just too hard. I hope the viewers understand that each and one here is a whole universe. And all these 100 universes, they ought to be home. They deserve to be home. And really, it's enough.
Absolutely.
They have to be back.
Absolutely. You said each one is his own universe, and they absolutely do have to come home. 426 days too long. Efrat, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for keeping us up in the news, and make sure, if you can, that you will be active. We need everybody active out there to join the call in order to make the action to bring them home. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And urgent efforts are underway to secure an elusive hostage for ceasefire deal with Hamas in Gaza. Israel has reportedly passed along to Hamas through Egypt a new 60-day ceasefire plan. Israeli officials say there is a reason for optimism. More from ILTV's Steve Leibovitz.
Mediated hostage for ceasefire talks are back on. Qatar has reportedly resumed a role as a key mediator, and Egypt presented a new proposal to Israel and Hamas. Israeli officials are optimistic that now is the time for a deal to bring the remaining hostages home. Defense Minister Katz said that Hamas is facing immense pressure to end the Gaza fighting. The time is right for a deal to be struck.
לגבי עזה, הדבר החשוב ביותר היום במלחמה בכלל זה להחזיר את החטופות והחטופים הביתה. זו המטרה העליונה שניצבת מול עינינו, ואנחנו פועלים בכל דרך כדי שהדבר הזה יקרה.
The reasoning for the optimism, a new Egyptian proposal is gaining traction. The Egyptians presented the proposal to Hamas representatives in Cairo. The plan includes a gradual cessation of fighting on the Israeli side, including a withdrawal from the Rafah crossing, followed by a declaration of a 60-day ceasefire. 1 week into the ceasefire, living Israeli hostages would be returned in exchange for hundreds of Palestinian security prisoners held in Israel. During the ceasefire period, Israel would maintain a presence in Gaza. It's too soon to gauge what pitfalls could still arise, but it's clear that the ceasefire for hostage deal is now on the table, and Inauguration Day, January 20th, is a target date to have the ceasefire already in place. President-elect Trump is already involved. He reportedly dispatched an envoy identified as Steve Witkoff to Doha to demand Qatari involvement to help mediate an agreement before January 20th. In a related development, President-elect Trump has named Adam Boehler as his special envoy for hostage affairs. The Biden administration says they're aware of the efforts of the Trump envoys, and both the incoming and outgoing presidents are pressing for a deal to free the hostages as soon as possible. The officials say that Trump's camp is being updated, but the two sides are not working directly together.
And joining us now with more on the latest in a potential hostage deal is Dr. Eric Mandel, the director of the Middle East Political Information Network. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So after months of stalled negotiations, there's now a renewed effort to negotiate a hostage deal. Now, Trump has appointed his own envoy for the hostages, and we all heard President-elect Trump's powerful threat on if the hostages are not released by his inauguration date. How involved is Trump and his team in the hostage negotiations? You know, his envoy was just meeting with Qatari officials. Who is taking the lead now? Is it Trump? Is it Biden? What's going on?
It is a little confusing. I'm of the mind that really we should have only one president at a time. So I think hopefully they're on the same line here. But the real questions are, number one, is Israel's continued military actions in Gaza endangering the hostages, or will it put pressure on Hamas to release the hostages sooner? I think a better insight beyond the names that were mentioned is Trump's Middle East advisor, Mahmoud Boulos, where he says the war is over. And again, I'm trying to gain insights into what Trump is thinking. There's very little military activity. He told the French Lapointe that both sides have already agreed, except for small minor details on the names, to an agreement. So I think the Netanyahu administration is basically following what Trump wants to happen to get a hostage deal done. But it still goes to the big question. What is a post-war settlement? What will happen? And I guess the thing that concerns me most from American national security interest is if Hamas is left in place and there is a hostage deal, what will the Trump administration do if Israel needs, and not if Israel will need to remain in Gaza really for years like they're doing in the West Bank? So how will the president put tremendous pressure on Netanyahu to end all military activity? And again, the hostages, the 60-day deal is only talking about some live hostages. I think the deal should be, and if I was a person, the president is putting in transactional mediators, I would want all the hostages at this point, that they couldn't continue with this leverage of what's going on. I've spoken to one of Israel's former negotiators, somebody who's in contact with Hamas, and he agrees that 100% of the hostages will come. That's the deal that should happen at this point, because this will continue again and again.
Now, Israel does have a temporary ceasefire with Lebanon, as you mentioned. It's hoping to have a temporary ceasefire in Gaza, as you said, 60 days, which will, of course, go into Trump's inauguration and Trump becoming president. You mentioned the day after. Do you think that Trump will pressure Israel to make these permanent ceasefires? Because the key word here is temporary as far as Israel is concerned. You mentioned Trump's Middle East advisor saying that the war is over, Netanyahu saying the war is certainly not over. So there's a little bit of a difference of narratives here. I mean, what do you make of this?
Well, if I could speak to the Trump administration, I would have to say that these wars will not be over. We will hopefully have good ceasefires, and that's the best you could expect at this point of time. Gaza and Lebanon are two different animals. Lebanon is a real nation, but a totally failed state that even though Hezbollah has been tremendously weakened, they are still basically in control there. Gaza is something that's self-contained. It is something that there is no, again, day after of what's there. Netanyahu doesn't want any PA, Palestinian Authority, involvement that's there. And that is a big problem. I'm not saying that the PA should be there, but you need to have something there. And if Hamas is not totally destroyed there as a military and governing entity, no other nation would want to put their soldiers in harm's way, whether they're Emiratis or Germans or Saudis. So I think they really need to get to some kind of day after in Gaza. But the ceasefire up north, that's tenuous. And you can see that at least the Biden administration is putting tremendous pressure on Israel, claiming that Israel's the one violating the ceasefire. But Israel's the supposedly side agreement that has been offered to Israel that they can stop violations of Hezbollah. And I'm hoping will allow Israel to continue to proactively, preemptively attack Hezbollah when it breaks the ceasefire, whether by missile launches, weapons movement, as the 1 million+ citizens come down and Taliban, and the Hezbollah is embedded with those civilians coming down, that Israel can act upon it. How long that will last? It will last probably for a while, because Hezbollah has been degraded, and it goes all back to Iran, the head of the octopus. Iran does not want to totally lose their most important proxy in the ring of fire. So I think before Iran's interest, they will want to not get to a threshold level that Israel goes back to full kinetic action.
All right, Dr. Eric Mandel, thank you so much for your analysis today. And the fragile Israel-Lebanon ceasefire is holding, with no cross-border attacks reported in the past 24 hours. At the same time, the IDF is operating against any threats in Lebanon, and ground forces continue degrading Hezbollah infrastructure near the border. And not just in Lebanon, the Al Arabiya news channel reported on an extensive Israeli strike against weapons warehouses north of Damascus in Syria. More from ILTV's Steve Leibovitz.
There have been no cross-border attacks from Lebanon in the past day, and the ceasefire appears to be holding. Inside Lebanon, the IDF is acting when needed. The Air Force struck a launcher in Majd al-Zon that posed a threat and was in violation of the agreement. Ground forces destroyed munitions found in several South Lebanese villages. The army said the deployment continues to remain focused on degrading remaining Hezbollah assets in areas controlled by the IDF. According to U.S. Secretary of State Blinken, the ceasefire is holding and the mechanism created to deal with violations working. According to Blinken, currently both sides appear to be committed to maintaining the pause in fighting. Prime Minister Netanyahu has said that the 60-day ceasefire is not the end of the war in Lebanon. The period is due to end just after President-elect Trump's inauguration.
And in northern Israel, the ceasefire with Hezbollah gives residents of the north a chance to return home. But they're not returning to the homes they once knew and loved. Instead, they are forced to pick up the pieces and rebuild. After months of relentless cross-border fighting, hope flickers for Israelis returning to their homes in the north. In Metula, a town near the Lebanese border, residents are assessing the damage left by Hezbollah's rocket attacks. The ceasefire with the Iran-backed group, which began on November 27th, has brought a temporary calm.
In June, there was a big attack on the house, and all you see is the destroys of our beautiful house. I know it will be difficult to build our house, but I believe the country will help us, and we'll have again a beautiful house.
Like Mirav, thousands of families hope to rebuild, but the scars remain deep. Hezbollah strikes have claimed 45 civilian lives in northern Israel and the Golan Heights. Over 60,000 evacuees are still waiting for the green light to return. The ceasefire terms are clear. Israel will halt military operations in Lebanon, while Lebanon must prevent any armed attacks from groups like Hezbollah. Yet the truce remains fragile, with tensions simmering on both sides. For now, the people of Metula and northern Israel cautiously step back into their lives, aware that peace may still hang in the balance. And now, it's time for our Hebrew word of the week. Each week, along with eTeacher, we learn a new Hebrew word and relate it to the Bible, current affairs, and our everyday lives. For more info on the Rosen School of Hebrew, please scan the QR code on your screen. But in the meantime, let's hear this week's Word of the Week.
Welcome to Hebrew Word of the Week. I'm Mariella, and in this segment, together with eTeacher, we explore the beauty and depth of the Hebrew language. Each week, we learn a new Hebrew word or phrase and discover how it's used in the Bible, current events, and everyday life. Today's Hebrew word is nitzachon, which means victory. In Hebrew, nitzachon is not only about winning, but also overcoming obstacles, achieving goals, and persevering through challenges. Nitzachon is a word deeply rooted in both biblical and modern Israeli culture. In the Bible, victory often symbolized the triumph of good over evil or the success of a people who fought against overwhelming odds. Today, it represents personal and collective victories, whether in sports, national defense, or personal milestones. In modern Israeli society, the concept of nitzachon holds great significance. It's a reminder of the resilience and determination of the people, as well as a source of inspiration in both everyday life and moments of national pride. Here are some examples of how the word nitzachon is used in a sentence. Hanitzachon ihyeh bizchut avodah kasha. This victory is thanks to hard work. Nitzachon b'milchama talui b'achdut ha'am. Victory in war depends on the unity of the people. If you're interested in learning more about the Hebrew language, check out eTeacher. This online and live course is the most established Hebrew language instruction institution. You can learn with a time-proven method for every level or start from scratch. eTeacher offers dynamic online courses with live video lessons, weekly webinars, and ample support, allowing you to connect with a lively global community for an enriched learning experience. Scan the QR code or click the link below and visit the eTeach website today to learn more. I hope you enjoyed learning about the Hebrew word nitzachon. Please join us next week for another episode of Hebrew Word of the Week. And in the meantime, reflect on the victories in your own life, big or small. How has the concept of nitzachon shaped your journey? Feel free to share your thoughts and experiences with us in the comments below.
A fitting word, nitzachon. And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Mostly clear skies are expected tonight around the country, and temperatures should reach lows of around 12 degrees Celsius or 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow, mostly sunny skies are expected alongside warm temperatures set to reach highs of 22 degrees Celsius or 73 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channel, subscribe to our newsletter, and explore our website, iltv.tv. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Ladar Gavelazi. Be well, stay safe, and thank you so much for watching.